Hello, my name is Emma LeClaire, and this is my video for Ramachandran, Chapter 10. Ramachandran starts off Chapter 10 by introducing three examples of pathological laughter. First, there is Willie Anderson, 1931. 25-year-old plumber couldn't stop laughing at his mother's funeral. His laughter started as his mother's casket was being lowered into her grave. His laughter continued for several hours afterwards. Willie's cousin took him to the hospital for his unacceptable laughter. Dr. Ashley Clark checked his pupils and vital signs. 2 days later, a nurse found him unconscious in his bed. He had suffered a severe subarachnoid hemorrhage, and he died without regaining consciousness. The postmortem showed a large ruptured aneurysm in an artery at the base of his brain that had compressed part of his hypothalamus, mammillary bodies, and other structures of the floor of his brain. Then, in 1936, there is Ruth Greenough, 58-year-old librarian from Philadelphia. She had suffered a mild stroke in the past but could manage her job. She had experienced a violent headache. Within seconds, her eyes turned upward and she was seized in a fit of laughter. She could not stop. Short expirations followed each other in such rapid succession that her brain grew oxygen-starved, and she broke into a sweat, at times holding her hands to her throat as if she was choking. Even an injection of morphine given by the doctor had no effect on ceasing her convulsions of laughter. The laughter persisted for an hour and a half while her eyes remained upwards and wide open. She was conscious and could follow doctor's instructions, but was unable to speak. At the end of an hour and a half she lied down completely exhausted. The laughter persisted, but noiseless, little more than a grimace. Suddenly she collapsed and became comatose. After 24 hours she died. She literally died laughing. The postmortem revealed that a cavity in the middle of her brain, called the third ventricle, filled with blood. A hemorrhage had occurred involving the floor of her thalamus and compressing several adjacent structures. Dr. Purdon Martin, an English neurologist who described Ruth's case, said, "The laughter is a mock or a sham, and it mocks the laughter at the time. But this is the greatest mockery of all. The patient should be forced to laugh as a portent of his own doom." Ruth and Willie are reconstructions of patients originally described in an article by Ironside in 1955. The clinical details and autopsy reports have not been changed. The kinds of pathological laughter seen in Willie and Ruth are rare. Only a couple dozen cases have been described in medical literature. More recently, the British Nature reported a modern case of laughter elicited by direct electrical stimulation of the brain during surgery. The patient was a 15-year-old girl named Susan, who was being treated for intractable epilepsy. Doctors hoped to excite the tissue at the focal point of her seizure and were exploring nearby areas to make sure they did not remove any critical important functions. When the surgeon stimulated the supplementary cortex, close to the region in the frontal lobe that receives input from the brain's emotional centers, he got an unexpected response. Susan began laughing uncontrollably. She ascribed her merriment to everything she saw around her, including a picture of a horse. People around her looked incredibly funny, too. The doctor said, To the doctor, she said, "You guys are just so funny standing around." Ramachandran goes on to point out that when the available literature is gathered, a striking fact jumps out, that the abnormal activity of damage that sets people giggling is almost always located in portions of the limbic system. Ramachandran references the limbic system as a laughter circuit, which includes the hypothalamus mammary bodies, the cingulate gyrus, that are involved in emotion. The limbic system, as already gone over in Chapter 8, consists of a number of nuclei cell clusters interconnected by long C-shaped fiber tracts. The amygdala, located in the frontal pole of the temporal, receives input from the sensory areas and sends messages to the rest of the limbic system to produce emotional arousal. Eventually, this activity cascades into the hypothalamus, and from there to the autonomic nervous system, preparing the animal, or person for this case, for action. Given the complexity of laughter and its infinite critical overtones, Ramachandran finds it intriguing that a relatively small cluster of brain structures is behind the phenomenon, a sort of laughter circuit. But identifying the locations of a laughter circuit does not explain what laughter exists or what biological functions it might be. Asking why a given trait has evolved is absolutely vital for understanding its biological functions. Yet neurologists who study patients with brain lesions rarely ask this question. This is astounding to Ramachandran, given that the brain was shaped by natural selection, just as kidneys, liver, pancreas, and other organs were. Well, I found a more current article that is by Justin S. Fitzburn, entitled "Lesions Studied of Human Emotion Are Feeling." The lesion method has revealed many different emotional dissociations involving different lesions or brain damage. Feaston talks about the lesion method provided unique insight into how the human brain generates emotion and feelings. Findings from several detailed case studies that have questioned the role of intercontract has emphasized the importance of utilizing the lesion method for elucidating brain behavior relationships, and has highlighted the distribution nature of emotion processing in the human brain. Recent work has explored a number of interesting topics, including a discussion of emotional experience from memory in patients with amnesia, the reliability of specific emotion deficits following focal brain damage, including fear and the amygdala, and the investigation of conceptuatory neural mechanisms in lesion patients. Examples of different emotional dissociations revealed with the lesions method are double dissociation between emotions and feeling while listening to music, described as damage to the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, reduce the emotional response to music, damage to